The presentation I will soon deliver to you was first crafted by the Florida Legion South to reach an audience of unbelievers. Those who were trapped in the idea that they could still save America. However, as we continually refined our presentation, we found new video material, new images, new information. Even our own eyes grew wide with new understanding. Where before we believed ourselves to be fully convinced of the futility of reforming the empire, the information that we uncovered for this presentation just strengthened our foundation and made us realize that after viewing what some of our own people were still doing, that they needed this presentation as well as those who had not yet been convinced. Today, you're going to see some things that are familiar to you. You might hear some words of Dr. Hill or Franklin Sanders ringing in your ears, and there's a reason for that. Quite frankly, once these men have put out the message, I can't say it any better. And another reason is we obviously need to hear it over and over again because we're not abiding by the message. A lot of us are doing nothing for the cause of Southern independence on a daily basis. So some of us are doing a lot, but we're doing the wrong thing. So, hence today's presentation. Hopefully the things that you'll learn in the next hour and the remainder of this convention will motivate you to get to work and return next year with stories of success. It's been said that what a person believes is based on three things. They are, number one, what a person hears first, number two, what a person hears most, and number three, what a person hears from what he believes to be a reliable source. Unfortunately, this formula has been the downfall of the South and the Southern people. For some of us here today, and unfortunately the majority of those outside this building, our worldview and our concept of nationhood has been formed and continues to be refined by sources we believe to be reliable, and falsely so. Those sources have an agenda that is counter that of our mission here in the League. Some of those sources include the so-called superstars of talk radio and television. You know their names. Many of them may preach limited government and may even pay lip service to states' rights. But when it comes right down to it, their American nationalist agenda causes us all to suffer under an unbearable union with people who want to subjugate us Southerners and the rest of the Union with socialism. They do this because they have to please listeners from Florida to Alaska, from Maine to Hawaii. They are patriots for profit, and their listeners are their meal ticket. They're sort of like preachers in a megachurch who have to tickle the ears of their congregation rather than tell them the hard truth. If they told the truth, their church would shrink and so would their offerings. So it is with these men. They're trying to please people of divergent interests and make them all believe that their interests are the same. These people are American nationalist entertainers, first and foremost, and have no love for you as Southerners, your culture, your history, or your institutions. How many of you in this audience think that Bill O'Reilly, for example, on Fox News, you enjoy watching him because you think he's a traditional, conservative voice of reason and, to quote his own words, looking out for you? Show of hands. Anybody really believe in that? Here's a video of Mr. O'Reilly in a recent discussion on education. Let's take a look at how this popular opinion shaper feels about the Southern people as he opines in front of millions of gullible television viewers.
What about the Civil War? We have recreations, we limited, almost as if it happened yesterday.
If a school district or a state, say Mississippi, were teaching their children in public school that the Southern cause was worthy and that the South should have won, I would say, out of there, well, that's blatant.
How's that for fair and balanced attitude? Who is he really looking out for? It's not us as Southerners. But fortunately, we Southerners aid and abet people like Mr. Bill O'Reilly every day. How do we do this? We do this with our own language. We have conquered ourselves with our own vocabulary. We refer to ourselves as the American people instead of Floridians, Georgians, Alabamians, or even citizens of the states. We do this by using the words country, nation, and America. And let me say that we as the Southern people, we are a nation in the truest biblical sense of the word. But we are not a nation as these people are using the term. And while I'm speaking on the subject of America, let me challenge everyone in this room to find a country called America on any map. There is no such thing. America is a continent, it's not a country, and there's two of them. We are Americans in the same way that Canadians, Argentinians, Brazilians, and Peruvians are also Americans. We are Americans in the same way that Spaniards are Europeans, Egyptians are Africans, and Pakistanis are Asians. We might use a more correct term of union to describe this failed North American experiment. But even then, it's a crime against language and just law to refer to our current state of political affairs as a union. Union necessarily implies free consent. Therefore, calling the current United States a union is as much a sham as calling a shotgun wedding ceremony a marriage. So-called conservatives boldly stress the individual rather than the group mentality, and that's as it should be. However, when it comes to the individual states of this union, the individualism is lost, and the politically correct group attitude is encouraged above all else. We Southerners are a separate and distinct people from those of the North, the West, and the aliens which we are forced to share our land with. Self-rule under our own laws is the only answer to the current political, economic, social, and cultural nightmare that began in 1865 and continues to emanate from Washington, D.C. Everyone here today in this room sees a problem. Everyone knows that something must be done. But what? What we have been doing for the last 146 years has utterly failed. Failed. If you don't believe that, just look who's sitting in the White House right now and the Congress. So rather than continue to play this losing game, we present the only strategy left available to salvage the last vestiges handed down to us by our revolutionary forefathers and our Southern forefathers as well. But before we discuss this strategy, we have to discuss who we are as a people, to separate ourselves from that America, that nation out there. We are a people that believe that Southern culture is distinct from and in opposition to the corrupt American mainstream culture. Therefore, we stand for our own sublime cultural inheritance to seek to separate ourselves from the cultural rot that currently is called modern American culture. We are a people that still reveres the tenets of our historic Christian faith and acknowledges its supremacy over man-made laws and opinion. That our Christian faith provides us the surest means of securing the welfare of all mankind. That our primary allegiance is to the Lord Jesus Christ and His Holy Church. I think it isn't sounding familiar to you. It absolutely should. If it's not sounding familiar, you haven't been studying enough. We believe our strongest and most enduring earthly affections and allegiances are to those people and places closest to us. Family, friends, neighbors, villages, towns, cities, counties, and states. Conversely, our weakest attachments are to far-off abstractions, such as the nation, the environment, the global community. Southerners are a people bound closely to the land. It is more than just a resource production. It is who we are. It defines both our character and our worldview. It was the European people who settled the southern part of this continent and carved the paths which we as Southerners still follow today. The first Catholic prayer ever said in the New World was uttered in our Southland near what is now the city of St. Augustine in 1513. In 1562, the first Protestant prayer was spoken on the banks of the Florida River by French Huguenots. In 1607, the English settled the colony of Virginia for the purpose of propagating the Christian religion. And mixed with these and other people, let us not forget the massive ways of the Scots-Irish, who author James Webb attributes the character traits we Southerners are so very proud of. Loyalty to kin, extreme mistrust of government authority and legal strictures, and a propensity to bear arms and use them. These people were instrumental in forging the paths to greatness on this continent. Those paths served us well, and through God's blessing, made us the envy of the world. The Southern people haven't left those old paths. The federal government and its blue state minions have. We haven't removed the landmarks of our fathers. They have. We haven't promoted the murder of 45 million. They have. We haven't scoured and raped the country and aroused God out of every heart and hiding place, out of every schoolroom and football game and school board meeting. They have. We haven't set children against mother and father, wife against husband, woman against man. They have. We haven't legitimized every form of fornication and foulness. They have. We haven't driven the farmer off the land and the smallholder out of his property and made our people renters and strangers in their own land. They have. We haven't traversed the globe with our armies and fleets, bombing cities and nations and imposing upon them our imperial will or death. They have. At one time, we were content to live as separate people with our own language, culture, and ways, in union with them, as long as they just left us alone. All we ever asked was to be left alone. But they don't leave us alone, and they never will. They will never stop until they have erased every last vestige of our Christianity, our South, and our Southernness from our land and our children, until we have our own separate country. What do we want? We don't want just a better deal. If that's all you want, you get a government job. You'll get full benefits and inflation-adjusted wages every year. What do we want? We want out. We want our own nation, a nation obedient to God. We want liberty, not license. We want our own nation because we are our own people. And as freedom-loving people, you should want this too. Straight to the point, interposition, nullification, and finally secession have become necessary for our freedom. And you should understand that waking up in the morning to a free and independent South may seem intimidating, but it's not something to fear or run away from. At some point, a state must act upon the freedoms to be gained at the cost of the sacrifice to be made. The fact is crystal clear. Federal reform is no longer possible. Appealing to the likes of Ron Paul, Glenn Beck, Sarah Palin, Michelle Bachmann, Mitt Romney, and a host of other so-called conservatives to save us is no more than a fool's errand at best. These people are American nationalists. They are centrists. They're not going to save our Southland. The following videos provide just two examples out of countless hundreds of how ineffective the American empire is at reforming itself. These videos show 8 presidents over a 37-year period discussing the need for reform in the areas of independence, energy independence, and education. Let's watch.
For decades, we have known the days of cheap and easily accessible oil were numbered. Now is the moment for this generation to embark on a national mission to unleash America's innovation and seize control of our own destiny.
This country can dramatically improve our environment, move beyond a petroleum-based economy, and make our dependence on Middle Eastern oil a thing of the past.
We need a long-term energy strategy to maximize conservation and maximize the development of alternative sources of energy.
There is no security for the United States in further dependence on foreign oil.
We will continue supportive research, leading the development of new technologies and more independence from foreign oil.
This intolerable dependence on foreign oil.
New standby emergency program to achieve the independence we want. We will break the back of the energy crisis. We will lay the foundation for our future capacity to meet America's energy needs from America's own resources. Wind turbines, nuclear energy, solar, energy-efficient windows,
Energy-efficient homes.
natural gas, hydro, American coal, solar power,
Ethanol, not just from corn.
atomic power,
Wood chips and stalks or switchgrass.
Fuel cells,
natural gas,
Zero-emission coal-fired plants.
solar panels,
Better batteries for hybrid and electric cars.
and ethanol.
Ethanol. Plant products for gasohol. We have the world's highest level of technology.
We have the notes.
America is a rising nation.
At the end of this decade, in the year 1980, the United States will not be dependent on any
than a matter of 3 or 4 years if we just get after it and treat this like it's important.
Another great goal, to replace more than 75% of our oil imports from the Middle East by 2025.
I'd like for this country to have a real education president for a change.
I'd like to be the education president. I don't ever expect to sign my name to any law that is more important than the Education Act of 1965.
Our goal of quality education is on a collision course with the escalating demands for the public dollar.
Passage of tuition tax credits,
We must address some very real problems.
voluntary school prayer,
It is not just a money problem, but it is a money problem.
and abolishing the Department of Education.
Now it's up to you, the local citizens of our great land, to stand up and demand no child, not one single child in America, is left behind.
Ladies and gentlemen, we Southerners have to have our heads firmly planted in the sand, not to know by now and for the umpteenth hundredth time that contrary to the opinion of those so-called union lovers, the federal empire cannot be reformed. Pleading our case to the enemy is fruitless, regardless of the venue. They have not listened, and they will not listen. Just consider the rhetoric of political discourse every 2-year election cycle. Those elected in the prior term are always responsible for the current crisis, and so the cry is out, just elect John Q. Conservative, and he will redeem us. Call him Ron Paul, Mitt Romney, Michelle Bachmann, whoever. Of course, in 2 years, when we're no closer to constitutional liberty, poor old John Q. will be the goat. People are addicted to political whack-a-mole, and it's very contagious. It's been spreading throughout the land right before your very eyes. 150 years ago, in describing the federal government, Confederate States President Jefferson Davis addressed the Southern Congress with these words, quote, "An organization created by the states to secure the blessings of liberty and independence against foreign aggression has been gradually perverted into a machine for their control of their domestic affairs. The creature has been exalted above its creators. The principles have been made subordinate to the agent appointed by themselves." Folks, that was 150 years ago. And today, 2011, a century and a half later, we can all agree that the Creator is still under the foot of the creature with no end in sight. Yet, we continue to hear reputable men and women tell us that they believe the best course of action is to work within the system and elect conservatives to take back our country, whatever that means, and recover our freedom. And yet, they ask you to do this impossible task with the current union of over 300 million people covering almost 4 million square miles, and do this all without consulting the wisdom of our Southern ancestors. How's that been working out for you? We know that all too often a battered spouse will stay in a marriage because of a misdirected sense of love and loyalty, holding on to the false premise that a different approach and better conduct toward the batterer will surely stop the abuse and save the relationship. And in the case of this union, when hearing our continued cries for reconciliation, the Federals only continue to play the abusive role again and again and beat and abuse the battered spouse with renewed vigor. Here's more evidence of why the federal government cannot be reformed. The United States Constitution, for all practical purposes, is irrelevant because it can mean anything a federal judge or a politician says it means. While the Constitution of 1789 was an ethical exercise of skillful statecraft, it failed in 1860 after only 71 years. It was intended to form a more perfect union, but that union failed. Those pocket constitutions we're so fond of promoting with their illegal Reconstruction amendments are truly foreign to our forefathers of 1787. Not only has the Constitution failed at the national level, but also at the individual level. The common law rights, which the Federal Bill of Rights aimed to protect, have been eroded or abrogated. But what remains lives on in moral peril. Our efforts at liberty and freedom to self-rule are stymied at every turn by federal legislation, regulation, and politically correct commandments. And so, the federal government that our fathers gave us has been so utterly perverted, it is totally unaccountable to the state and their citizens, and no mechanism exists for checking it. Presidents now rule, not govern, through cabinet departments, high-level political czars, and executive orders. And speaking of executive orders, just consider the latest edict, number 13575. Here, President Obama recently formed the White House Rural Council, which is intended to, in the President's words, work across executive departments, agencies, and offices to coordinate development of policy recommendations, promote economic prosperity, and quality of life in rural America. But as always, there is a catch, and a big one. Let's watch.
President Obama signed an executive order that will seize greater power over food, fiber, and energy in our vast countryside areas. The president created the White House Rural Council to, quote, make sure we're working across government to strengthen rural communities and promote economic growth. Sounds great, but get this. The council involves a long list of the most powerful people in America. Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner, the Defense Secretary's on it, Attorney General Eric Holder, even the head of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. Joining me now is radio host Ben Ferguson. Hey Ben, President Reagan, 50 years ago, he started talking about this, and look what we got now. We have a White House Rural Council. Are you nervous about this?
Sure, and anybody that's in rural America should be worried about this, because what they're saying is we're going to look at what you're doing in your life, and if we see that you're not somehow using your land to the advantage of the overall American people, then we may have some quote-unquote maybe strong suggestions for you.
And when asked if the government was overreaching in the area of defense, Obama's talking head said this.
How is it an overreach? He is going to be putting money into the
Defense Department.
The Defense Department? Who knows how they'll be involved?
Who knows what the Defense Department will do, she says. After 146 years of reconstruction, we surely do. The ballot box, continuing on, has been compromised and no longer offers the prospect of meaningful change. Even if the election process had not been compromised, no real choice exists as long as the two major parties are in control and in competition with each other. Yes, competition with each other. Their only goal, to borrow a phrase from a popular TV reality show, is to outplay, outwit, and outlast the competition for power over you, the citizen. Third-party ballot access is almost impossible to achieve and maintain. Voters in large blocks, especially those who profit from the policies of the current regime, legal and illegal immigrants, welfare recipients, minority interest groups, and others who benefit from public spending, have a vested interest in legislating toward their exclusive wants, or at the very least, preserving the status quo in their favor. Major media outlets, the fourth branch of government, control the flow of information and allow no real expression of dissent. They use a rhetorical device in their presentation to assume a given social or political concept is either a good or bad thing in their discussion of the concept, and never admit that its value judgment is open to question. Their articles and reports never define the concept, thus allowing them, therefore, to apply the concept wherever they see fit. There is no room for dissent. When the value judgment has been closed to interpretation, the media never justifies their major assumption that the concept is a good or bad thing. They necessarily pretend that disagreeing people do not even exist, because the force of the message lies in subconsciously telling people that everyone thinks this way. This leads people to alter their own internal values when they are at variance with a particular application of the concept. Just look for this con job the next time you are presented with a controversial news story on a topic such as presidential authority, diversity, homosexuality, racism, multiculturalism, environmentalism, government largesse, and the list goes on. You should also know that this practice is accepted as journalistically appropriate reporting. The people are afraid of losing their tenuous hold on prosperity and personal peace by rocking the boat. The USA Patriot Act and the Department of Homeland Security have undermined the Bill of Rights in the name of national security and provide the blueprint for a police state in this union. Dissent is squelched through labeling it terrorism. Huge annual federal deficits and the accumulated national debt have mortgaged the wealth of future generations and will have to be repudiated. The left took the offensive at least 50 years ago and has held the momentum ever since. Very serious problems of scale exist, with only one representative in the House to approximately 580,000 citizens and no representation of the state in the Senate due to the 17th Amendment. The people would be justified in saying no taxation without representation. That gives each of us 0.00017% representation in Washington City. How many of you start to feel a little bit small right now? Hands up. The point is that even though many so-called conservative Republicans were recently elected to Congress and our state houses, we're just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, as they say. Within the land known as the United States, we have two separate and distinct people. Though we speak the same language, worship the same God, and share the same history, there are more things that actually divide us than unite us. In December of 1860, while addressing this congregation, the Reverend Benjamin Palmer stated, quote, "We have vainly read the history of our fathers if we fail to see that from the beginning, two nations were in the American womb." Later, in June of 1861, the Reverend Daniel Dreher, speaking of the same natural divide, preached that nature and nature's God has marked us out for two nations. As you will see from the following slides, the differences between our people, our beliefs, our culture, and our politics is easily discernible from those of the North and West. The map on the left shows the division over the 1860 presidential election, which led to the War for Southern Independence. The boundaries you see between the Southern people and the rest of the North American continent were permanently written in blood and etched in our genetic memory that year, and every year after that, as you will see in future maps. To the right, you see the election map of 1904. 39 years after the close of formal hostilities in 1865, it is clear there are two nations occupying this landmass. Let's skip ahead 100 years to the election of 2004. As you can see, not much has changed, except the two great Southern exoduses, which followed the War for Southern Independence and World War II, placed the Southern diaspora over a wider area in search of jobs and fortune. The liberal, socialist, blue state centers of power remain just as firmly in place as they did in 1860 and 1904. Moving ahead closer to the present, the 2008 electoral map to your right shows the cultural, social, economic, and political will of the Southern people. Not much change, though the large influx of Northern liberals into some of our Southern states is beginning to erode our traditional political leanings. All the more reason to separate ourselves before the damage becomes irreversible. I'm sure everyone has heard the term Bible Belt before, along with the terms God's country and Jesus land. These terms are used outside the South to mock our commitment to our Christian faith. We Southerners have adopted these derisive terms as our own, which only goes to show that both Southerners and those outside the South see yet another clear division between our regions. This map gives a general indication of where the Bible Belt is located. As you can see, it largely incorporates the traditional South alone. It's not that the Bible Belt is the only place in the Union that has Christians in it. Heck, I hear there's even Christians in the same states that Nancy Pelosi and Barney Frank live in. However, here in the Bible Belt, we're pretty uniform in our religious beliefs in spite of the numerous denominations that cover our region. This map shows the relative commonality of our faith compared to other regions of the Union. We are clearly a people united by faith as well as separated by that same faith from other regions. Next, we have a map from the 2008 ESPN poll. which asked the citizens of the Union their opinion on the public display of the Confederate flag. Here, the will of the Southern people is revealed as a distinct cultural division on a map, which looks like it was drawn in 1860, 150 years ago. We Southerners are not generally fond of labor unions. This should be expected of a people who have been at the forefront of fighting the advance of socialism for the last 150 years. This slide, to your left, demonstrates the South's near unanimous opposition to the unionization of the workplace. On your left are states with laws prohibiting agreements between trade unions and employers making membership or payment of union dues or fees a condition of employment, either before or after hiring. On your right is a map representing the division of the Union during the American Civil War, so-called. The red states are the Confederacy and the blue states are, ironically, the Union. Tying in with the previous slide demonstrating the conservative nature of the South is this slide, which shows the South's opposition to softening regulations in the so-called don't ask, don't tell policy regarding homosexuals in the military. And regardless of your personal opinion on homosexuals serving in the military, the people of the red states clearly do not accept it. In the field of law enforcement authority, you can see from the following map that the red state South largely prefers to maintain local and state control through this example of H.R. 1913. H.R. 1913 is known as the Local Law Enforcement Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009. What the bill really promotes is a federal paragraph by imposing federal criminal penalties on crimes which are already within the jurisdiction of state and local criminal law. Despite the promises of federal money and support for the eradication of so-called hate crimes, Southerners, by and large, wish to maintain local authority. The usual blue state culprits to our north and west who push for federal intervention and the erosion of state sovereignty are again clearly evident in this map. Sadly, though, from my home state of Florida, the same four largely populated and minority-dominated southeastern counties that made her a blue state in the 2000 presidential election have unfortunately continued that trend in this issue. These four transplant-rich blue counties, and I'll name them for you, Monroe, Broward, Dade, and Palm Beach, only help to reinforce the truth that we in the red state South are a separate and distinct people, and we wish to remain that way, lest our laws and way of life become imperiled. And lastly, this map shows you an aspect of the health care reform law you haven't been shown on national TV, and for good reason. It's divisive in ways that the powers to be don't want you to be divided. Oh, it's okay for you to argue endlessly over Republicans versus Democrats, liberals versus conservatives, rich versus poor, producer versus consumer, and many other ways. The man has all that under control. But they can't have you arguing region versus region, especially when the region being most slighted by this new law went to war over similar tyrannical measures once before. In a short but fascinating interview recently hosted by Bill O'Reilly on the O'Reilly Factor, guest Dick Morris stated that the purpose of this new health care law is to require the South to adopt the North's standards, but it does not provide the money to the South to do so. After the first year, the South must pay for it all. Dick Morris quotes Alabama Governor Bob Riley, who said that Obama is trying to equalize the North and the South, so the South will no longer have a competitive advantage. Card check will make the South unionize, the Medicare bill will make the South's taxes higher, and cap and trade will toughen the environmental standards in the South. This will not go away. Let's watch the video.
How seriously do you take the states that are challenging Obamacare as being unconstitutional?
Oh, I think they've got a great case. The only real reason that taxes are higher in the North than in the South, the overwhelming reason, is that the South has a much more restrictive Medicaid program. They basically cover the elderly and very few of the poor, whereas the North has a very generous one. And this bill requires the South to adopt the North's standards, but doesn't provide the money. After the first year, the Southern states have to do it. I had a conversation once with the governor of Alabama, a great guy named Bob Riley. He's probably watching tonight. And he said what Obama's trying to do is to equalize the North and the South, so the South no longer has a competitive advantage. By card check, he wants it unionized. By this Medicare bill, he wants the taxes higher. And by cap and trade, he wants the environmental regulations tougher. So that basically there's no reason for a business ever to move to the South. And I think that's a good perspective on this, and I think that's why the states are suing, and that's why I think they're going to win. And I think they'll open up a whole new field of 10th Amendment law about unfunded federal mandates.
Now, folks, I told you everything that Dick Morris was going to say before he said it, and then I let him say it. Because what he has to say is so powerful, and so damning of the federal regime, that you had to hear it twice. Interestingly, the only reason we have a copy of this little segment here is Steve Walker was recording it, recording the O'Reilly Factor while it was playing. This segment was never archived. We couldn't find it in any archive. Probably for good reason to you as Southerners. That's, as I said, some pretty damning evidence there. The Reconstruction is still on. So as you can see from the maps I've just shown you in the Dick Morris interview, these serve as powerful reminders that much of the country does not want the same thing that we do here at home. On the other side of the coin, we do not want what they want. After all, they just forced Obama on us. We Southerners do not wish to be united with Marxists. Over a half century ago, John C. Calhoun, one of the greatest statesmen of this union and most prolific observers of the American regime, explained that, quote, "The cry of union, union, glorious union can no more prevent the disunion than the cry of health, health, glorious health on the part of the physician can save a lying, dangerously ill patient. Besides, this cry of union comes commonly from those whom we cannot believe to be sincere. For if they loved the Union, they would necessarily be devoted to the Constitution. It made the Union, and to destroy the Constitution would be to destroy the Union." Calhoun remarked that the South was the balance wheel of the Union, which prevented the whole from flying apart under the stress of the manias that regularly seize hold of the mainstream. From what we've just seen, it looks as though this is still true, although our ability to control this machine grows weaker year by year. Since 1865, the Southern red states have had their traditional Christian laws, morals, and values outvoted and overturned by the socialist, liberal blue states to the north and west. We have not been free to uphold our opinions on such things as gun control, abortion, the death penalty, marriage, education, immigration, and too many other subjects to catalog here. For all practical purposes, we have been administered to as though we were subject provinces, fit only to provide tax dollars and cannon fodder to the American empire. Let us remember that the ideal government, as bequeathed to us by our forefathers, rests on the consent of the government. It is a sacred right of the people to alter or abolish the government when it becomes a struggle. The Southern people demanded that right in 1861, and it is evidenced by the maps you just saw. They have shown they remain a separate people worthy of self-determination to this very day. The problem today is that the federal system is broken on such a scale that we can't put the pieces back together one piece at a time. There are too many powers outside the South that prevent us from exchanging individual broken pieces of the jigsaw puzzle for new ones. It has to be a clean sweep. It took us 146 years to get to the current level of crisis we're in now. And we don't have another 146 years to get things back in order. In fact, the last 146 years has proven that the political techniques that we have used to attempt to save the country or restore the republic have been absolute dismal failures. After generations of voting for Tweedledee and Tweedledum, petitioning a deaf and unresponsive federal government, marching, shouting, sign carrying, flag waving, pretty speeches, we have not returned one step closer to the constitutional union of states handed down to us by our forefathers. We've only stepped further away while playing the game in a rigged system. Why has this happened? This has happened largely because ignorance, fear, and that self-protecting tendency to stay within the boundaries of the political safe zone keeps us from daring to step outside the political box. More importantly, Nearly every election map since 1860 has shown a distinct divide between what we now call today the red states and the blue states. We have two different people on this continent with different ideas on cultural, social, economic, and political goals, and never the two shall meet. Never. It is just as criminal to attempt to impose our unwelcome values and goals on the socialist, Marxist blue states as it has been for them to do to us these last 146 years. The U.S. Constitution of 1789 died in 1860. That which replaced it, starting with the 14th Amendment, is Marxist. Let us in these sovereign southern states return to the paths of our fathers, and let other states see the wisdom of our action and follow us if they dare. To protect ourselves and return to liberty and freedom to our beloved Southland, we must chart a different course and make an impassioned appeal for her sovereignty through our state legislatures to protect us from the oppression of Washington, D.C. With this in mind, we must now concentrate all our efforts toward that appeal. So rather than using valuable time moaning, droning, fussing, and complaining about the empire, and asking our citizens to depend on 535 mostly total strangers in Washington City for our fate, our resources should be expended in pressing our state lawmakers and all candidates for legislative office to pass and uphold legislation favorable to our Southern culture and the sovereignty of our states. This must be our chief principle of action. All our efforts must be tested against this question. Does it aid our quest for independence? If not, then don't do it. It's as simple as that. We cannot and have no right to say that which does not wish to be said in Washington, D.C. and the socialist blue states. We must save our people and the land in which we live. That's our Southland. Jefferson Davis, in his congressional address, had the right answer when he said, "We feel that our cause is just and holy. We protest solemnly in the face of mankind that we desire peace at any sacrifice, save that of honor and independence. We seek no conquest, no aggrandizement, no concession of any kind from the states with which we were lately confederated. All we ask is to be let alone, that those who never held power over us shall not now attempt our subjugation by arms. This we will, this we must resist to the direst extremity. The moment that this pretension is abandoned, the sword will drop from our grasp, and we shall be ready to enter into treaties of amenity and commerce that cannot but be mutually beneficial. So long as this pretension is maintained with a firm reliance on the divine power which covers with its protection the just cause, we will continue to struggle for our inherent right to freedom, independence, and self-government. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been said, if you are not free to lead, you are not free. You really want freedom? You really want liberty? You say you do. Don't be afraid to stand up for independence, your independence. So what is this strategy we promised you earlier? There could be no independent Southern nation without hard-working, tireless Southern nationalists in every state. Every person sitting in this room should fill that role as an active member of the League of the South. If you believe our cause is just and right, you should convince your friends, family members, co-workers, church members, and others that they should join as well. The League of the South is the only Southern nationalist organization that has a successful program of establishing active and vigorous local entities that we call chapters in every state and county in the South. Everybody else out there, they're just a bunch of World Wide Web commandos. They're playing Confederate dress-up, filling bogus Confederate positions in the government, and trying to solve all the South's problems through endless internet chatter. Flesh and blood Southern nationalism resides here in the League of the South, with real leaders and members of high caliber and conviction. If you're not a member of the League of the South, you should join today. Furthermore, each of you must withhold your political allegiance and support of the American Empire by transferring your political loyalty to the Southern National Congress. The Congress is a deliberative body designed to provide Southerners with a forum to to voice their authentic concerns regarding the South's continued cultural life, prosperity, and distinctive existence. The Southern National Congress provides a means of expressing Southern goals, grievances, and solutions in an open manner not presently existing anywhere in the public sphere. This Southern institution works hand in glove with the League and is the only political body which represents the interests and needs of the Southern people. You should contact your SNC state representative right away to see if you qualify as a delegate for your state, and if so, work diligently for your delegation to obtain political independence and sovereignty for your state. We encourage everyone in this audience to return to your homes after this conference and begin this journey to independence immediately by seceding from the empire on a personal and daily level. The League calls this abjuring the realm, and it can take many forms based on your level of both courage and commitment. Removing your children from government schools and homeschooling them or placing them in private Christian schools is but one important example. Buying only Southern-made products or improvising products you can't find made in the South can do wonders for our Southern economy while hurting the alien empire. Become a vocal critic of the empire and admonish all who continue to come to the emotional rescue of this dying beast every time it suffers a setback. We call this delegitimating the empire. The word scalawag, or its modern equivalent, must again become a reproach to our people. You must make the promotion of the League and Southern independence a daily activity in your lives. Going to a meeting once a month or once a year and sitting around bad-mouthing the empire, that's not going to cut it. You must educate your neighbors by saturating your communities with League literature. The Free Magnolia is an excellent and very economical tool of mass communication. You create your own League flyer and use it as an insert of the Free Magnolia to offer your readers additional information on the League and guide them to local and state contacts. You must withhold all that the empire demands. You must withhold your children from their endless foreign wars. You must withhold your labor and the fruits of that labor. You must withhold your wasted patriotism. You must resist. And remember, there's no more time for passive resistance. The empire is close to collapse. We don't have time to wait and only hope that we're in a position to pick up the pieces and go our merry independent way. No, the beast is dying and dragging us to hell with it. We must organize and prepare ourselves now before a vacuum is created and something else besides Southern nationalism slips into that vacuum. Southern active and aggressive resistance to the empire by all honorable means is the order today. Our level of resistance is restrained only by our honor and our courage. We must be active and aggressive, be as active and aggressive as our personal courage allows. And then we must pray to God for the courage to go 10 steps further. Ladies and gentlemen, today you have seen but the tip of the iceberg as to what we must do to begin securing our independence. It is my sincere prayer that today's presentation has shown you the utter futility of attempting to reform the empire and why such reform is undesirable. At this moment forward, let's wipe the dark dust of the empire from our feet and walk the paths of our forefathers towards a bright and independent Southland. The program agenda of this year's League Conference has been organized to help you achieve these goals. At this time, League members are passing out copies of the League of the South strategy. Please take one, study it, practice, organize around it, and resist. Thank you very much for your time.